Each night, a candle is lit, and the whispering tomes open. Inside are the strange, the forgotten, the stories time tried to silence. Some say history is written by the victors, but here the lost are given voice. Breathe deeply and follow me into the hidden chapters of history.
You step into Strasbourg a summer night in 1518. The air holds the kind of warmth that lingers after sunset. Pressing close between narrow buildings, leaned toward each other like eavesdroppers. Cobblestones still radiate the day's heat through your sandals. An oven's faint scent of bread drifts from a nearby doorway, mingled with tanner's smoke and a sour trace of the river. Everything feels heavy, hushed, as though the city itself has stopped to listen. Somewhere ahead, among the twisting lanes, you hear it, a soft tapping that repeats irregularly, heel and toe against stone. It comes again and again. At first, it's hardly louder than your breath, but it draws your mind tight as a drawn string. The sound shouldn't be there at this hour. Curfew bells have rung. Even cats hide from the heat. You pause. The rhythm continues. Turning a corner, you glimpse her. A woman standing alone in the street, her face pale under the torchlight, spilling from a shuttered window. Her lips are parted, her eyes unfocused, staring through the night. Then her body sways slightly, a movement so small it might pass for dizziness, but she doesn't collapse. She begins to move again, hands fluttering, shoulders rising and falling like waves just before a storm. You listen. No music, no ballad, no lute or drum, only the dull patter of her shoes slapping unevenly against the stones. She turns one way, then another, and the motion grows. One arm lifts, the other drops. It almost looks like a dance, but without grace. A rhythm forced from inside her rather than chosen. Sweat shimmers across her forehead, though the air is still. Do you take a step closer, expecting her to waver or speak? But nothing. Her breath hitches in silent counts. You realize, with a chill, that she's been at this for a while. Her dress clings to her skin, hemmed dark with grime. She moves like a puppet whose master can't decide when to stop the song. A neighbor opens his window a crack, muttering at the disturbance. Another light flares. Feet scrape as others peer into the lane. The woman doesn't notice. She only moves fast, ankles blurring, arms crossing the air where invisible strings seem to pull. It's strange and entrancing, the way you might watch fire, aware of danger yet unable to turn away. Hours pass, or so it feels. The tapping becomes steady like a heartbeat you can't silence. The moon climbs around you. More people gather in uncertain half-circles. Some whisper prayers. Others argue softly over whether she's mad, possessed, or drunk beyond reason. The truth is no one knows. At last, she slows, staggering to her knees. For a moment, stillness hangs heavy as the heat. Then she pushes herself back up, trembling, and begins again. The crowd groans. Someone crosses himself. Another spits for luck. You feel the tension spread like ripples through every onlooker. By dawn, the smell of sweat and torches hangs low in the air. The woman finally falls, limbs rigid, chest heaving. Two men carry her toward the shade of a doorway. Yet before the hour fully turns, she rises again. The city watches, uncertain whether to pity or fear her. Strasbourg has known madness before, visions, street preachers, flagellants, beat in themselves for redemption. But this feels different. There is no prophet's cry, no sermon, only the mute communication of the body caught in some endless motion. As the light strengthens, you realize the city has truly awakened. Work stalls. People whisper her name, Frau Traffier, a tanner's wife, known but unremarkable until now. She gives no reason, no plea. You sense that something vast has just begun, and nobody will understand it for centuries. By midday, the crowd thins reluctantly. Yet still you linger near the edge of the street as though gravity holds you here. The city bell tolls the heat of noon. In that moment, you notice something faint beneath the sound of hammers in nearby workshops. The steady echo of repeated steps continuing somewhere out of sight. A rhythm that refuses silence. A story forming in motion before language can find it. You could walk away, but curiosity perhaps, duty anchors you. You look around and realize you're not the only one waiting for what will happen next. Neighbors lean over balconies, bakers freeze mid-sweep, apprentices peer from behind stacks of leather. Strasbourg itself seems to be holding its breath. That small street, unremarkable any other day, has become the stage where history first trembles awake. And though you cannot yet name it, you feel the beginning of an epidemic that carries no visible wound, no cough, no blotch, only this, a rhythm as contagious as fear. The weeks surrounding that first dance were already cruel ones. You walk the city by daylight now, seeing everything with sharper focus. The Rhine glints to the east, slow and wide, but its surface hides the rot of discarded hides and driftwood. The air tastes metallic. Midsummer sun beats down, driving shadows tight beneath overhangs. Every color feels exhausted. Even the cathedral stones shimmer with trapped light. The people move with a kind of purposeful weariness. Bakers carrying trays of dark bread. Fishmongers with salted catch that smells stronger than usual, evidence of spoiling. In the markets you hear raised voices, grain merchants accused of hoarding, wives bargaining with clenched teeth. The stalls that once rang with easy chatter now hum with restrained desperation. You sense the fragile line between civility and panic stretching thin underfoot. A loaf of bread costs too much for most. The city council's decrees on price and purity hang from posts, but they wilt unread in the heat. Behind one stall, a child sucks a crust as though it were treasure. His mother murmurs that God tests their faith. You wonder how long faith can compete with hunger. In the taverns, wine is thin as vinegar. Men sweat in corners discussing bad omens. A comet said to have passed weeks earlier. A fox crossing the cathedral square at noon. The world, they whisper, tilts toward judgment. Walking farther, you pass a church door left ajar. Inside, priests arrange candles before an image of St. Vitus the One, said to protect against tremors and fits. The candles scent mixes with the musk of incense and wax. A young boy polishes silver cups beside the altar, humming softly. His mother kneels behind him, face hidden beneath veil, mouthing words of protection you've heard since childhood. Deliver us from the fever that dances. You shiver, hearing those last two words echo. Outside, the baker's smokestacks draw your eyes to rooftops like ladders too steep for hope. Smoke blurs the sky into a headache gray haze. Somewhere above, gulls cry from the river. Their voices twist thinly through alleys, sounding almost like laughter. You make your way toward the tanner's quarter, where Frau Trafia lives. The narrow canal deliriums here, thick with runoff from workshops. Men soak hides in vats of urine and lime. The stench sears your nose. Yet even here you sense unusual silence. Those who once cursed and sang while working now glance over shoulders, uneasy. The story of the woman who dances has spread fast, carried faster by imagination than by any feet. People tell it differently already. One claims she defied her husband and mocked saints until spirits punished her. Another swears she swallowed a draught brewed by cunning healers and lost her mind. A third insists this is no punishment, but a sign the body moved by divine prophecy. You listen, hearing in their voices less certainty than fear disguised as faith. Each explanation gives them a brief feeling of control, like a candle held up against storm wind. That evening you climb back toward the Guildhall Square. Thick air muffles even the shoemaker's hammer. You pass a physician's house, recognizable by the dried herbs nailed above its door. He leans from his window arguing with two town watchmen about miasmas. The foul vapors, he thinks, cause fever. When pressed about the dancing woman, he shrugs. Excess heat of blood, he says. She'll burn it out. His words sound confident only on the surface, like paint covering cracks. Across the street, a priest delivers an opposite verdict to his gathered congregation. Beware levity. When hearts laugh amid famine, the devil joins the dance. The people's faces shine with sweat and fear. They nod, though many look less convinced than resigned agreement offered as defense. Leaving them, you wander toward the riverbank. The Rhine rolls on indifferent, carrying barges loaded with grain bound for richer towns. You watch the water and imagine invisible spores drifting among the currents, or silent prayers carried downstream. The smell changes here, cool, green, almost merciful after the inner city's fumes. You breathe deeply, but peace doesn't last. On the far side you notice beggars camping under the bridge, their bodies thin as reeds. Two of them hum a tune, another claps rhythm softly against his knee. You freeze at the pattern for quick beats, like the pulse of distant footsteps. Coincidence, perhaps. Still, the sound sinks into your skin. As darkness gathers once more, you hear bells call Compline. Torches flare across bridges, and guards shout curfews. The city folds itself into uneasy quiet. You walk home through air that feels alive, swollen with half-formed possibilities. At every corner you expect to glimpse movement again, some echo of that first night's dance. Even when you reach your quarters, the rhythm lingers behind your eyelids. Sleep feels foreign, silence too loud. Days slide by, thick as syrup. The heat refuses to break, pressing minds into sluggish half-dream. You move through a world where everyone looks slightly fevered. Children scratch at dry skin. Merchants argue over dust. Heavy coins, monks mutter prayers that grow shorter each afternoon. And then one morning you learn that Frau Trafia still dances. She's been seen again, Days later, in the same street. Curiosity draws you out, despite the heat. A small crowd gathers already. Her movements now look harsher, more deliberate, as if each step drives nails into the ground. Her face glistens, her breathing rasps, but no one dares help her. You stop beside an old woman clutching a rosary. She whispers, "It's catching." You almost ask what she means, when from another end of the lane, a second person begins to sway the blacksmith's apprentice, barely grown. Then a third. The noise rises. Not music exactly, but rhythm made by chance, contact of shoes against stone, like rain beginning from separate drops. Panic murmurs through the onlookers, yet fascination roots them where they stand. You sense it too, that eerie pull to movement, the whisper in your muscles that says join or run. You stand still, gripping your arms to keep them steady. By sunset, there are perhaps 24 dancers. Some laughter slips between cries, hysteria and joy indistinguishable. You see one woman collapse. Others step around her until men finally carry her away. The rhythm never stops. It multiplies. When you return home the next night, heat still pressing the air flat, you hear the tapping continue from blocks away. Strasbourg has gained a new heartbeat. The following days spread rumor faster than any disease. Merchants from the next parish bring tales of hundreds dancing, of deaths mid-step. You race to the square yourself, needing confirmation and find it all true. Hundreds indeed. Arms stretched skyward, heads rolling back, legs jerking in sync to soundless tunes. You feel the vibration beneath your feet before you hear it. The collective tremor of bodies everywhere, faces glaze in ecstatic agony. Sweat pools on the stone like rainfall. Between bursts of shouting, some try to sing words that dissolve into gasps. The smellion, salt, fear tightens your stomach. Authorities stand in knots, whispering. Some cross themselves, others shout commands drowned by noise. You try to meet one dancer's eyes and find emptiness staring back. No recognition of you or anything else. It isn't joy, and it isn't madness, it's obedience to something unseen. You realize you're witnessing not just an occurrence, but an atmosphere taking form, a fever whose carrier is motion itself. The whole of Strasbourg trembles at its center, like fabric stretched to the point of tearing. Night draws near again. Torches burn in dozens, reflected in sweat-shine skin. The crowd surges, collapses, surges once more. Laughter gives way to screams. Someone mutters behind you. Saint Vitus walks tonight. You look upward at the dark tower of the cathedral, silhouetted against red clouds, and think, perhaps he does. You keep walking after midnight, because still you cannot sleep. Each alley leads to memory of rhythms. In the distance, the beat continues faintly. As long as it goes on, the city refuses rest. You notice what exhaustion has done to faces even, those not dancing bear marks like ash under their eye. One pattern emerges as you roam. Wherever the dancers appear, shutters close. Then, slowly, inevitably, new windows open again. Curiosity always outweighs terror. You, too, can't resist looking. Maybe you think watching might teach something about the limits of human endurance. Or maybe watching is simply surrender by another name. The next morning you meet a magistrate on church steps, red-faced and furious. He curses the near riot, blames immoral conduct, vows the council will act. You follow him with your eyes as he joins other officials inside. The doors slam. You know in your bones whatever decision they make will come too late. The fever of motion already moves faster than words, as contagious as breath. Days later, every hour you feel its hum vibrate through walls. Hammers in workshops adopt it unknowingly. Even the bells seem to echo its pattern. Life adjusts, unwillingly synchronized. You begin to suspect that what started as a woman's private affliction has become the city's shared pulse. Standing again in the square, you try to trace cause in faces. Hunger, faith, despair. The elements swirl indistinguishably. Yet amid horror, a fragile beauty flickers. Strangers hold hands to steady one another. Mothers cradle collapsing children. For brief moments, the rhythm becomes collective heartbeat, uniting every fear into a single movement. It dawns on you then, the dancing wasn't born from madness alone. It was born from life stretched so thin that only rhythm could hold it together. Hunger, guilt, devotional, condensed into step after step. When finally you turn away, your ears ring with phantom percussion. Strasbourg, the rich merchant city by the Rhine, now moves like one immense, exhausted body seeking release. You stop at the river before dawn. Mist curls low, cool against sweat. The first light glances across current and cobblestone. Somewhere behind you, even as sun breaks, the tapping begins anew. You close your eyes and count the beats until they fuse with your own heart. You begin to sense the shift before anyone announces it. By mid-morning, the square has grown quiet enough for whispers to carry. The council has met. Word passes from mouth to mouth, from stall to doorway, faster than the sound of sweeping brooms. They will fix it, someone mutters, though the phrase trembles with doubt. Fix what? The fever of motion. The invisible drumbeat lodged inside the hearts of hundreds. You follow a cluster of clerks hurrying across the square to the stone hall, where magistrates usually settle disputes about taxes or grain weights. Today, its high wooden doors flicker with candlelight even before noon. Inside, stillness reigns, except for the scrape of quills and the low grind of voices behind heavy robes. The air smells of wax, sweat, and tension. You press yourself near the threshold, half listening as the city's leading men argue. It spreads through corrupt air, insists one physician, his hand shaking above a parchment inscribed with neat lines about humors and heat. We must let it purge itself. Restriction would kill them. A priest counters, face flushed. No illness of the blood dances to no music. This is punishment. Those souls must confess. The mayor, caught between theories, pinches the bridge of his nose. Around him the room blooms with noise arguments, humidity, poisoned bread, temptation, and heat. Everyone talks. No one listens. The tone rises with every exchange, like water filling a basin too quickly. At last, a voice cuts through a head, magistrate, grey-bearded and deliberate. Gentlemen, the city will not descend into chaos. We are to act, not debate. He leans forward, speaking slowly enough that you can catch each phrase. If they are sick with fire, then fire must burn out. We will build them a place to dance, under guard until the demons should there be any, exhaust themselves. Murmurs ripple like distant thunder. You can almost hear the collective exhale of relief and alarm. The plan feels logical to men desperate for control. Let the madness consume itself under supervision, public order preserved, and perhaps God appeased through visible penance. Orders fly immediately. Carpenters are summoned to the Guildhall Square by dusk. They will erect platforms strong enough for dancers to move upon without crowding the marketplace. Musicians will be hired violists, drummers, pipers to accompany what the council now dares to call a therapeutic exercise. You step back into blinding sunlight, astonished. Therapeutic, an odd word for spectacle. Already couriers dart through streets with decrees, and guards bark instructions at bewildered citizens to clear debris from the chosen site. Children run ahead, shouting, "A stage! A stage for the dancers!" Their laughter twists through panic like smoke through air. By late afternoon, wooden beams clatter as workers hammer them into place before the Guildhall's toll for cud. The rhythm of their strikes merges with distant shuffling feet, the cities to hearts beating in dreadful harmony. You stand at the edge, watching boards take shape where bread once sold. Someone beside you jokes bitterly. At least now they'll dance on timbers, not our market goods. No one laughs. Through evening bells toll vespers while carpenters align planks. The stage glows red under sunset, the hue of raw meat. By the time torches ignite, everything is ready. The platform stretches across half the square, surrounded by hastily raised railings. Some call it precaution, others confession ground. Musicians arrive carrying lutes and small drums, faces pale with uncertainty. One wears a token of St. Vitus around his neck, rubbing it nervously. When questioned why he accepted the job, he shrugs. They said the city pays 3 times my usual money. In desperate times, outruns fear. At dawn, the council's decree is read aloud from the Guildhall steps. Let no man impede the afflicted. Let them purge themselves through movement until their bodies find peace. It sounds merciful, even rational. The crowd, hungry for authority's reassurance, nods. You feel unease, instead a chill hidden within words that sanction suffering. When the dancers, perhaps 200 an hour, herded toward the stage, the sight steals your breath. Clothes soaked, eyes hollow, some limping, others laughing beyond sense. They ascend as though answering a summons heard only by soul and muscle. Music hesitantly begins. Slow pipes, muffled drums. For a strange instant, the scene resembles festival. Children clap until mothers hush them. Then the fever sharpens. Notes quicken, bodies jerk faster. Rhythm turns erratic, not led by melody, but by something underneath. Even musicians, uncertain of tempo, stumble to follow what has no leader. You see arms flung skyward, men spinning, women collapsing, then rising again, as though wind animates their bones. Sweat sprays across torches. In another age this might be worship. Now it's endurance beyond prayer. Hours pass. You stand transfixed, despite the heat. The crowd around you sways unconsciously. Even those untouched field muscles twitch. Knees bend slightly, caught between empathy and imitation. A baker beside you mutters, "My legs hum," as if they too would join. You step back, clutching the post beside you, to anchor against that pull. Above the din, a harsh laughter erupts. One dancer turns circles so fast her braid whips blood from a cut ankle. Faces blur, motion dissolving individuality, until you see not people but shape, a spiral of humanity turning upon itself. The stage, slick with sweat and rain from clouds gathering overhead, groans under weight. Yet no order stops them. Guards simply watch. The plan was to let the sickness drain. To interfere would be sacrilege against reason. By midnight, storm clouds finally burst, rain hammering torches into hissed darkness. For a heartbeat you expect the deluge to quench frenzy, but water only heightens reflection, bodies glimmer in moonlight like liquid flame. Musicians shelter instruments, while drums echo longer under rain's percussion. The council's men retreat indoors. You remain in doorway, witnessing citizens cling to rails in half-mad devotion. When dawn thins the sky, the dancing has not ceased. Some collapse, others replace them with fresh zeal. Rumor later claims that deaths already number in dozens, though no official tally appears. The top plank of the stage splits. Workers replace it over broken forms. The spectacle must continue. They are told treatment must finish. You understand now that obedience can be fatal when twinned with faith in order. The days repeat in grisly rhythm. Each morning, the surviving dancers return by compulsion. Neither kindness nor force can restrain. Physicians in long robes watch approvingly from shaded galleries, noting pulse and sweat as if study alone can redeem them. Priests hover behind railings, some sprinkling holy water discreetly, unwilling to contradict civic policy but unable to trust it. Your observations turn inward. When the council authorized this madness, they believed they were containing chaos. Yet what unfolds looks less like containment and more like ceremony tragedy, disguised as cure. You glimpse the mayor one evening on balcony, lips pursed, watching until his shoulders slump. He departs without word. Those who ordered the music can no longer bear to hear it. The fever truly begins when the city forgets where sanity ends and performance begins. Dusk descends, heavy with the smell of wet timber. Lanterns line the square like cautious witnesses, trembling in wind. The musicians, now accustomed to playing until fingers blister, set into rhythm automatically. Their eyes are ringed with exhaustion, but glazed with awe when the first notes sound. The dancers shudder in answer, as if chords run from instrument to limb. What once appeared voluntary now looks supernatural. Each beat drives a ripple through the crowd. Bodies knock against one another. You feel air thickened with humidity and scent of iron looping between breaths. One woman tumbles from the platform into watching arms, alive yet unconscious. Her rescuers place her on cobblestones. She lies rigid, twitching. Another takes her place wordlessly. The cycle repeats until you lose sense of where motion begins or ends. As midnight nears, musicians find themselves possessed too not by frenzy but by duty. A drummer, bare-armed, drives sticks against skin until wood splinters. He laughs through tears, whispering that if he stops, the devil may claim us all. Nearby a piper collapses mid-tune, mouth frozen around red, gasping. Still another seizes his instrument, unwilling to let silence fall. His stage radiates strange glow, torches mirrored in pools of sweat. From the crowd comes chanting half prayer, half cheer as onlookers surrender distinction between horror and admiration. You stand close enough to feel droplets strike your arm, warm as spilled wine. Somewhere behind you, a monk whispers the litany of saints. Another curses him to hush, fearing the invocation might draw attention from heaven best left absent. Hours converge into a blur. The night air pulses like heart muscle. A young man climbs the railing, arms wide, spinning until he drops off the edge and crashes among barrels. No one screams. He is simply removed. Movement absorbs tragedy without pause. You lose count of days. Rumors speak of entire families succumbing, father, mother, child alike whirling in synchronization till collapse. Merchants complain of dwindling trade. Work ceases, but tax collectors still knock. The drums beat on a vicious lullaby maintaining civic rhythm. One afternoon, you watch a physician test a new hypothesis. He sprinkles vinegar upon a dancer's brow, then holds a mirror to catch reflection. When motion briefly halts, he cries triumph. Certain spirits hate their own image. Moments later, the woman shudders and starts again, scattering shards of glass underfoot. His victory vanishes like mist. Evenings bring heavier crowds, drawn by grotesque fascination. Wine sellers profit, beggars mimic stumbled steps for coin. The boundaries between afflicted and audience crumble completely. A boy not previously touched joins momentarily and cannot stop. Officials drag him away, but his legs continue twitching, even in silence. You realize contagion thrives best on spectatorship. Storms return intermittently, washing blood from planks. After each downpour, new bodies climb anew, chasing either deliverance or damnation. Rainwater runs pink into drains. The smell becomes unbearable metal mildew and something sweetly rotten. When drummers pause briefly to rest, moans replace melody, the city itself supplying percussion through heartbeat and breath. At last, reality cracks. You glimpse the mayor again, this time begging Bishop for help. The compromise forms quickly, spiritual intervention cloaked as civic order. Music will cease. Priests shall lead sufferers to the shrine of St. Vitus beyond town. No more stages, no more drums. The bishop's envoys prepare carts for travel, each marked with holy emblems against contagion. When proclamation echoes through marketplace, the dancing is to end. The crowd doesn't cheer. Silence follows first, then spreading sobs. Even those untouched feel hollowed by sudden emptiness. The rhythm that ruled them for weeks is sliced clean away, leaving stillness raw and ringing. Guards enter the square cautiously, gathering the half-living. Women stumble, their dresses stiff with dried salt. Men blink as though emerging from dream. The music stops, yet faint foot taps continue like remnants of infection. No one speaks. You sense embarrassment in officials' eyes, that peculiar shame governments feel when reason fails to publicly. Carts roll forward. Dancers are lifted inside gently. Some cry that they can still hear drums. Others blink upward, uncomprehending. The convoy begins along River Road toward the shrine. Rain starts, again soft, almost merciful. You follow at distance, unwilling yet unable to turn back. Hooves squelch in mud. Lanterns bob the city. Fades behind, but its echo remains, a steady, internal beat, impossible to silence. By dawn, the square stands empty save shattered wood and muddy footprints. Market folk sweep debris into piles, avoiding gaze of anyone who might remember participation. Carpenters dismantle the platform with reverence, as though unbuilding an altar. When boards finally vanish, a wet shadow remains darker than rest of stone, shaped vaguely like circle. You stand upon it, hear phantom rhythm whisper beneath boot. Even silence has memory. The fever has broken, yet its after-image glows inside everyone. Heartbeats train to respond to ghost tempo. Strasbourg resumes, trade, chatter, church bells, but faint residues haunt pauses between sounds. When wind blows through alleys just right, it carries pulse of that vanished stage. You close your eyes and imagine torches flaring again, faces glistening, the sizzy one vast, trembling organism. For now, calm returns. Priests bless soil with holy salt. Physicians record observations with forced detachment. But you understand what they cannot admit publicly. The fever stage was not an aberration. It was revelation. For weeks, the city wore its soul outside its body, raw and rhythmic. Even as cool air of early autumn moves in, you sense warmth beneath stones where heat of bodies once burned. And as you walk away, the last echo of drums fades into memory so complete it feels alive. Morning light falls pale over Strasbourg, rinsing the square in quiet disbelief. You wander through it cautiously, the stones still damp from night rain. Fragments of straw, broken laces, splinters from the stage lie scattered like remnants of a dream cheapened by daylight. The smell has changed, no longer sweat and smoke, but soap, vinegar, and ash. People have begun scrubbing away what cannot truly be cleaned. You stop beside a woman kneeling with a bucket, humming under her breath as she scrapes at the boards. When you ask if the work is city-ordered, she only shrugs. If we wash hard enough, maybe it won't come back, she says. Her voice trembles between fatigue and faith. Many speak of return, for no one trusts silence after so much noise. 2 apprentices drag away the last beam from the stage. Beneath it, the ground looks darker, pressed smooth by countless footfalls, an accidental memorial. A magistrate observes from a shaded corner, hiding eyes red with sleeplessness. He tells you the accounts will close soon, that the records will say the outbreak ended by divine mercy. Yet when he turns away, you notice his hand shaking as though still following rhythm. The weeks that follow feel slower, hesitant, as though the city must relearn how to exist without accompaniment. Markets reopen, but trade limps. Bakers' songs, once rhythmic proofs of mourning, fade into murmurs. Pipers keep their instruments packed, fearful of inviting repetitions. You realize the plague has left a second infection, unease. Everywhere people whisper theories, the beginnings of science entwined with fragments of myth. A physician from Basel arrives claiming mastery of humors, bringing jars of dried herbs labeled in precise Latin. He insists the dancers were overheated by imbalance of blood. To prove it, He bleeds 3 volunteers, already weak from hunger. They faint, and he calls it cure. Crowds gather to hear each new explanation, unwilling to accept that chaos needs none. A merchant swears that imported rye carried invisible corruption. Another blames wandering minstrels who disturbed peace with foreign tunes. Housewives speak of curses, children of sleeping saints, soldiers of poisonous vapors. Everyone creates logic suited to fear. You listen to them all, and each sounds reasonable until repeated out loud. Still, inquiry thickens. Scholars arrive to inspect parish notes. Scribes translate the event into tidy chronicles. One clerk shows you his folio rows of names, ages, days of death, the ink smudged by sweat. We must document the evil, he says, so that learning may prevent its return. But even he pauses mid-sentence, when a street boy claps twice in rhythm by accident, and everyone flinches as though struck. Inside a physician's workshop, you study shelves of instruments. Metal phlegm, glass, urinal, bundles of leech's remedies, promising order. The man who owns them gestures proudly. Had they called me sooner, I'd have cooled their livers with syrups. Motion breeds heat. Heat breeds delirium. His words chase themselves in circles, like the steps he condemns. You thank him, though his confidence leaves you unconvinced. Bet the monastery. Explanations turn inward. A prior, grey and precise, invites you into a library smelling of ink and dust. St. Vitus has tested this city, he declares. Such trials purifying. He opens a ledger to a page marked with red ribbon. In thick script, a scribe has written, "Those who danced shall be remembered for our correction." The prior dips his pen and adds below, "and forgiven for their suffering." You sense compassion struggling beneath doctrine, like light filtered through colored glass. Later, walking along the Rhine, you overhear 2 travelers debate another cause. The world itself is fevered, one argues. The sun burns nearer. Humors boil in every man. The other replies, "No, it was despair. Starvation breeds madness." Both speak truth in fragments, yet neither sees how desperation and whether faith and hunger had woven one net. In evenings you find yourself retracing paths once crowded with dancers. The streets feel larger now, drained of vibration. Children chase each other across cobblestones, unaware that weeks earlier those stones carried agony. The city endures by forgetting, but memory lingers in small shivers. A shopkeeper's sudden pause when wind rattles shutters. A dog whining a distant drumbeat during festival. Among learned men, formal inquiries begin. The council commissions a document summarizing causes. You help copy portions by candlelight. Terms like mania, querulous, contagious motion, sacred affliction appear beside lists of remedies. Fasting, prayer, bleeding, exorcism. Reading them aloud, you hear a mixture of medicine and superstition joining seamlessly, each pretending to be cure for ignorance. Yet beneath every clause seeps confession. We do not know. You attend one sermon where a young priest dares a gentler view. The dancers were not wicked, he says softly. They sought deliverance, the only way they could move toward it. The congregation listens, uneasy. Afterward, an older cleric scolds him for lenience. Still, several parishioners linger to thank him. You realize compassion might be the rarest interpretation of all. Weeks stretch into autumn. Cool winds clear the rot from air. Yes men in council declare miracle. Grain arrives from a river. Markets bustle anew, but trust comes slower. Fishermen say they still hear faint splashing at night, as if feet beat underwater. Superstition translates memory into sound. You keep notes of your owner, people, the smells, the way movement began without music. In margin you write, asterisk fear seeks body. When language fails, motion speaks. Asterisk it feels unscientific but true. The more you record, the more you sense that explanation may never comfort. Perhaps meaning lies not in why they danced, but in what the dance revealed. How close ordinary hearts live to breaking. As winter settles, Strasbourg softens under frost. Snow covers square where stage once stood. Children carve patterns in whiteness, unaware their play outlines the same circling forms their elders dread. Lantern light glows golden on walls, gentle as forgiveness. You walk home one evening as bells toll Compline. The air is crisp still. Then, faintly, inside your imagination, or perhaps beneath the ice-capped stones, you hear a single rhythmic echo, not haunting now, but tender, like heartbeat steady after long fever. You pause, listening. It is both memory and continuation, the cadence of survival. The search for answers continues in whispers long after ink dries, yet no argument satisfies more than that quiet sound. The dance, you realize, was never entirely tragedy. It was the body insisting on being heard when words fled, the city's collective heart trying to reset its tempo. And somewhere within you, a distant pulse, unsteady, human, and finally still. You wander the narrow lanes days after the fever quiets, drawn by curiosity more than duty. The questions won't leave you alone. What could make bodies move themselves into death? You long for answers that don't depend on miracle or curse. The city hums with speculation now. Explanation has become its new contagion. In the physician's quarter near the cathedral, you find a scholar named Keller spreading faded grain samples across his table. The air smells of vinegar, rye, and soot. He beckons you closer, fingers deep in a wicker basket filled with kernels streaked in black. This, he says, is the devil hiding in bread. He lifts a handful to the light. The kernels glint like obsidian. You touch one, it flakes to powder between your fingers. A fungus, he explains, born in the wet summers. The farmer reaps it with the rye without noticing. It bakes into every loaf. You watch him grind a few grains in a stone mortar, muttering that the poison burrows deeper than any knife can cut away. When eaten, he goes on, it tightens veins, drives fire through limbs, and confuses the mind. Those who felt tingling in the feet believed spirits had claimed them. They danced to cool the burn. His voice softens. But it was no saint, only spoiled bread. He invites you to sit while he outlines his evidence. Earlier, harvests were poor. Granaries overflowed with damp rye. Reports from nearby villagers mentioned strange sickness-a woman who complained of crawling sensations. A boy whose hands cramped like claws. They called it St. Anthony's fire, Keller says. You have seen its twin in Strasbourg. You picture the dancers moving as if their bodies belonged to someone else, veins glowing beneath skin. The image fits too neatly. It comforts and frightens you. Still, doubt seeps in. But some danced for weeks. You protest. Wouldn't poison kill faster? Keller frowns, admitting the mystery. Perhaps the doses differed. Perhaps imagination fed what fungus began. He leans back, satisfied to leave uncertainty shrouded in learned language. Outside his window, you see loaves cooling on a baker's rack, their crusts dark and rough. Suddenly they look suspect, less food than threat. You recall the smell of bread mingling with sweat in the square during the outbreak. The idea worms its way into youth. The possibility that salvation itself, daily sustenance, carried ruin. You leave the physician's house heavier with knowledge, yet no nearer to peace. In the street, neighbors barter for flour, unaware of theories fermenting above their heads. Children chase one another with crusts, crumbs clutched like prizes. Each bite feels, to you, an experiment. Later that week, another scholar requests your presence. A cleric-turned-philosopher named Lorenz, where Keller's home smelled of medicine. Lorenz's study smells of candle wax and damp parchment. Scrolls line every surface. No two stacked straight. He greets you gently and gestures toward an empty chair. You seek reason, he says, but reason isn't always material. He tells you to close your eyes. Picture Strasbourg last summer, the famine, the sermons, the heat, each heart beating alone under strain. You do, and your chest tightens at the memory. Now, he continues, imagine those beats aligning, one catching another until they merge. The city itself becomes heart and body. What happens when such a body panics? You open your eyes to find him watching you closely. Fear is contagious, he says simply. We breathe each other's dread. Minds crack together. He reases, pacing as he speaks of new philosophies drifting from Italy. That emotion might travel between people like invisible smoke. That tension, shared long enough, becomes motion. These dancers, he says, did what talk could not. They exhausted their fear through limbs rather than words. His hands mimic their movement, slow, deliberate turns. Call it collective trance if you wish a spell cast, not by demons but by despair. He believes hunger dulled bodies until suggestion finished the work. When that first woman moved, others saw themselves in her. Their hope and terror collided, and the body took command. You ask if he believes in saints at all. His mouth curves in a sad smile. I believe the divine hides in what we share. When we move together with our will, we touch that forced or able but human. His explanation feels simultaneously rational and mystical. Walking home, you sense the line between science and spirit blur. Ergot poisoned the bread, perhaps. Fear poisoned the mind. Could both be true? Days pass with this new duality alive inside you. You begin noticing small tremors in daily life that echo the larger one once devoured the city. Market women rocking side to side as they gossip. Monks swaying unconsciously during chants. Soldiers tapping feet when idle. Rhythm never truly left. It only tamed itself. In the Guild Tavern, one evening, you overhear two men debating Keller's fungus theory. One argues that poised bread makes perfect sense. The other insists famine alone could twist perception. You listen as their voices rise, each defending not truth but comfort. Beneath their argument lies fear. If madness can spread without touch, then no one is safe. Another merchant claims he saw dancers smile in bliss before death proof. He says, of possession rather than illness. His friend counters that the smiles were grimaces of pain. They trade examples back and forth until laughter dissolves into uneasy silence. Truth itself feels unreachable, shifting with every retelling. You visit the countryside to investigate the grain. Fields stretch yellow beyond the walls, brittle and uneven. A farmer greets you warily, eyes hollow from successive bad harvests. He shows you rye heads peppered with dark lumps no bigger than beetles. We used them, he admits. Better black bread than no bread. He rubs fingers together. Powder stains his skin violet. In his hut, his wife boils thin soup. She's heard the rumors about poison but shrugs. Hunger kills faster than mold. You share the meal despite your unease. The bread tastes bitter. That night you dream of dancers moving through fields of waving grain, their limbs bending like stalks before wind. Returning to the city, you carry more suspicion than evidence. The scholars will twist your words to suit their systems anyway. Yet the more perspectives you collect, the clearer one thing becomes there may never be a single cause. Strasbourg's epidemic was a chord struck from several strings: body, mind, belief, and circumstance, vibrating together until sound became unbearable. You stop by the monastery library again and find Lorenz speaking with Keller. The contrast is almost theatrical, one cloaked in rational arbs, the other draped in philosophy. They argue, but with laughter now, each secretly craving the other's approval. You take a seat between them as they exchange theories. Keller begins. Without ergot fungus, there is no illness. Show me any other agent capable of twisting limbs into convulsion, Lorenz counters. And without despair, there is no stage for fungus to perform upon. The poor have eaten rotting bread before, without dancing. Keller jabs his finger toward the table of dusty manuscripts. You underestimate the body's chemistry, and you underestimate the mind's intensity. You interject, asking whether it matters which came first, poison or panic, if both led to death. They pause. Finally, Lorenz nods. Perhaps reason lies there. One ignited the other. Flesh and thought are not enemies. Keller grunts agreement. Perhaps to end the discussion, yet you sense reluctant respect between them. That night you record their dialogue in your notebook. Asterisk bread turned to fever. Fear turned to motion. Neither singly sufficient. Asterisk the phrase comforts you like balanced scales. Still, uncertainties return with every facile drum. In autumn, a small dance troupe performs benign folk steps in the marketplace to mark the new harvest. The rhythm is cheerful, yet people watch stiffly, unable to forget recent horrors. When one child spins too fast and falls laughing, mothers snatch their offspring back as though flame had leaped from ground. You hear whispered prayers mixing with applause. The memory of motion remains half sacred, half taboo. Every explanation strains beneath that contradiction. Keller's fungal charts convince the scholars, but not common folk. Lorenz's notion of shared trauma comforts some and angers others who crave moral certainty. The bishop approves whichever theory harms no doctrine. The council writes both into its final record just to be safe. In evenings, you sit by the river reading notes aloud like lullaby. Asterisk, the body burns. The mind imitates. The city becomes chorus. Asterisk, despite repetition, the words never deaden. You realize you're not analyzing history, living inside its echo. Winter closes Strasbourg beneath clouds, the color of tin. Snow erases stains from square, but doubt shows through like ink beneath scraped parchment. Keller departs for Basel, promising to dissect new grain next season. Lorenz stays, preaching patience to anyone who will listen. You visit him often, finding his fireside talk soothing after the months of noise. One night he tells you quietly, sometimes explanations matter less than empathy. The dance reminds us how quickly fear can choreograph the human heart. His tone carries neither pride nor despair, only resignation. Perhaps our task isn't to stop such dances, but to learn how to listen before they begin. You remember the first night, the sound of a single pair of feet echoing through Alizand. Understand what he means. Warning signs are rarely silent. People simply forget how to hear them. Bind later. Your mind revisits Keller's grains and Lorenz's pulse metaphors. Fungal spores drift through air. Emotions do too. You begin to picture them together, invisible particles swirling among rafters, settling on bread and breathing alike. Under stress, both germinate. The city merely provided warmth and hunger as soil. By candlelight, you write your own synthesis. Perhaps the dancing plague was not one sickness, but many, layered like skin. The body poisoned by bread, the mind poisoned by fear. The miracle survived long enough to reveal the cost of silence. Your pen hesitates at the final line. You add, and even now, the world hums with smaller dances we do not notice until too late. Reading it aloud, you recall Keller's laboratory smell and Lorenz's trembling hands describing empathy. You realize both men, for all their learning, suffered the same hidden fever, the need to make sense of chaos. So do you. Weeks later, your notes circulate among scholars. Some praise them as balanced, others condemn them as indecisive. You hardly care. For you, the writing itself feels exorcisms. The rhythm that haunted you finally softens into understanding not of cause, but of connection. When spring returns, young shoots pierced thawing banks along the Rhine. Farmers test new grain, cautious but hopeful. In market stalls, bread smells wholesome again. You buy a loaf, hesitating before first bite. The taste is ordinary warm, sweet, alive. You smile at the simplicity of it, relieved by how little mystery remains inside plain food. Yet as you walk home through mild air, you catch distant drumming from an apprentice practice hall. The cadence steadies, rises, repeats. Passers-by take no notice, but your heart answers each beat. For an instant, you feel entire city vibrating underfoot, a gay knot in frenzy, but remembrance. Keller's poison, Lorenz's fear, your own restlessness. They merge here into one lingering truth, that every community bears its hidden rhythm, the pulse of its worries. Sometimes it sleeps, sometimes it awakens and demands movement. Be stop on bridge overlooking the river, watching light shimmer on water like hundreds of tiny mirrored steps. Life continues below, carts rumbling, gulls circling, all ordinary, yet fragile. You whisper a line you once recorded. Fear seeks body when language fails. Then you turn toward home, walking evenly, letting your steps fall in slow, measured time, an answer to rhythm rather than surrender. The evening bells echo, far softer than before. For the first time, you believe Strasbourg might truly rest. You walk through Strasbourg a few weeks after the dancing has ceased, the air finally cooling under autumn's breath. The square smells of rain and smoke. Merchants sweep fallen leaves from thresholds, murmuring about mercy returned. Yet when talk drifts toward the dancers, voices lower, as if the subject itself might awaken what sleep has only barely claimed. Tonight you are guided by a priest father, Matthias, young but wearing the weary calm of someone who has witnessed too many inexplicable things. He invites you into the cathedral for evening vespers. The nave glows with candlelight, each flame mirrored on gold paint of saints watching from wooden panels. He speaks softly as you walk beside him, your steps echoing through the hollow ache of stone. Many think it was hunger, he says. Others say poison. His voice falters briefly before settling into conviction. But I believe they angered St. Vita. The name hangs between you, familiar yet uneasy. St. Vitus, the holy protector of those afflicted by fits and seizures, the patron invoked when limbs betray their masters. Children once carried his image as charm against trembling. Now that same saint is blamed for the city's torment. You ask Father Matthias why the protector would punish. Patrons guard the obedient, he replies, pausing by a candle whose wax droops like melted bone. But when reverence wanes, protection turns to lesson. He gestures toward the altar where an old tapestry depicts the saints, martyrdom Vitus, standing serene as flames curl around him. He suffered fire without fear. The dancers, perhaps, were given a shadow of that ordeal to remind us of faith lost. P beckons you toward a side chapel heavy with incense. In the half-light offerings hang along walls, wax limbs, ribbons, tiny wooden shoes, old tokens left by those healed of trembling. The sight unsettles you, these miniature echoes of human flesh suspended in still devotion. Father Matthias kneels, fingers tracing red silk tied around one wooden foot. These were once prayers, he whispered. Now they are warnings. You kneel beside him, though reverence feels mixed with apprehension. So what must be done for forgiveness, you ask? His answer comes like confession. We will take them all who suffer still to the saint's shrine in Saverne. There they will pray until movement ends. A pilgrimage. You imagine the remnant dancers limping along muddy roads, their bodies wrecked by weeks of motion. The idea seems both cruel and merciful. The priest senses your hesitation. Walking in penance may steady what dancing disturbed, he said. Every journey outward is also a journey back to grace. When you step again into the open air, the city is alive with preparation. Messengers carry candles and crucifixes to the church steps. Parish brothers pack cloths soaked in holy oils, intending to anoint wandering feet. Mothers whisper blessings over the departed. Some watch from windows, torn between pity and dread, as carts are gathered to bear the weakest. That night, bells toll midnight, while volunteers sew red ribbons, as emblems of St. Vitus's sunned the sleeves of the afflicted. Their faces appear half asleep, drained yet expectant. You stand among them as priests sprinkle holy water that gleams briefly before sinking into worn fabric. The people murmur a Latin refrain meaning "Have mercy, U protector of motion." The sound trembles more than sings. Father Matthias approaches with a crucifix large enough to serve as procession mast. At dawn, he tells you, we walk to Saverne. His eyes glimmer in torchlight. You should come to witness repentance or healing, whichever it proves. You agree before thought catches up, drawn less by faith than by curiosity. Perhaps by the same magnetic pull that kept you watching the first dancer. You wonder if pilgrimage might quiet what reason never could. When the bell sounds again hours later, its tone feels gentler, as though the city itself exhales relief that some resolution will be attempted through familiar ritual. Dawn arrives, pearled with mist over the Rhine. You join the procession as it gathers near the cathedral gates. Priests in front carrying icons, then carts with the frail, then townsfolk walking to abreast. The afflicted move among them like ghosts half present. Their eyes avoid horizon. Their feet remember rhythm, though music is forbidden. Each step marks struggle between obedience and residue of motion. The bells strike thrice. Father Matthias lifts his cross, and the line stretches forward. Feet shuffle on cobblestones, slick with dew. The chant begins low, a hum more sigh than song. Sanctivic, ora pro nobis. St. Vitus, pray for us. You walk beside a woman scarcely older than 20. Her hair clings in damp strands along her cheeks. She tells you she once danced without knowing why. She remembers pain, then nothing until waking in the chapel. Her voice cracks when she adds, I'm afraid to sleep now. I dream I am still moving. You offer quiet assurance, but she shakes her head. Dreams spill into waking, she murmurs. Along the banks, morning unfolds, slowly rids bowed under weight of moisture. Barges drifting with cargo unnoticed by pilgrims. Fishermen pause to bless themselves as the odd procession passes, muttering hope that river breeze might carry away contagion. Dogs bark briefly, then fade behind distance. The farther you march, the more landscape softens. City walls give way to meadows bruised by recent floods. The scent of wet earth mingles with beeswax from candles carried in clay holders. Every so often, priests pause to recite prayers of cleansing. They raise bowls of river water and fling droplets into air where they glitter like fragments of sunlight. The crowd murmurs amen, though no immediate comfort follows. Near mid-morning, the line halts, where road overlooks the Rhine's curve. Here the river widens into mirror, catching every motion above. The afflicted approach its edge, guided gently by attendants. Some kneel, touching water as if testing temperature of forgiveness. Their reflections tremble like living things. You dip a hand as well. The chill cuts through fatigue, grounding you in the present. Father Matthias stands upon a rock, raising his cross high, while chanting the legend of St. Vitus, how he defied his persecutors, how boiling oil could not consume him because faith made his flesh unburnable. He danced before the Lord, the priest recites, and the world mistook God's joy for madness. The irony prickles your skin. Perhaps that confusion never ceased. A boy near the front begins to sway. His mother grasps him by shoulders, whispering prayers until he steadies. The gesture spreads. Others cross themselves furiously, afraid relapse might start anew. Matthias notices and lifts his hand for calm. Fear not. The saint receives motion as offering now, not punishment. The group resumes walking. By afternoon, sun glows tawny, bending shadows long across fields. Carts creak, wheels sink into mud. You hear soft weeping from one vehicle where an old man collapses mid him. His companions stop to fan him. A priest administers blessing of release. The line pauses in reverent silence until the man's breathing evens. No one dares interpret it as death or cure. As twilight deepens, torches replace sunlight. Hundreds of small flames move along river path, mirrored by ripples below stars, inverted on water. You realize the pilgrimage itself has become ritual theater. Each walker an actor in tragedy rehearsed for redemption. The sight mesmerizes. The glow reflecting on faces, the rhythmic shuffle of sandals, the muttered refrain looping endlessly. Ora pro nobis, ora. When camp is made for night, tents bloom like pale shells beside water. Some pilgrims rest, others cannot. You sit near fire listening to distant frogs and the low murmur of confession. A woman tells her neighbor she once mocked a visiting friar who warned of divine wrath. Perhaps that laughter bound me, she says. Another man admits he danced because watching others suffer felt unbearable. Even guilt proves contagious. Father Matthias joins you briefly, his cassock damp from the evening mist. They speak more freely under stars than under roofs, he muses. Maybe forgiveness lives closer to open sky. You ask if he truly believes the pilgrimage will heal them. He glances toward river where torches reflect like veins of fire and answers. Healing is only half the purpose. The other half is remembrance. Before sleeping, you walk down to the shore alone. The water whispers softly, lapping against stones worn by centuries. You crouch, watching tiny points of candlelight drift from upstream, offering small cups, carrying wax flames released by pilgrims with whispered thanks. They float past like an anchored souls. Each carries its prayer written on folded scrap. Some sink quickly, others sail onward until swallowed by darkness. You imagine St. Vitus somewhere beyond the horizon, receiving this fragile flotilla. The scene feels both absurd and sacred, convincing precisely because of its humility. People asking forgiveness from moving water. Near midnight, a faint wind stirs reed. Across camp you hear rustle of restless boxes. A few cannot stop twitching, even in sleep, the motion gentle now, rhythmic as breathing. Perhaps in dream they still dance, but this time the rhythm soothes rather than consumes. When dawn edges gold through mist, Father Matthias calls assembly for final leg to Severn. Voices croaked with fatigue join new verse of him. Blessed be the fire that refines. The phrase echoes as line begins again along road. As they move, villagers emerge from farmhouses to watch. Some kneel, others wave sprigs of herbes for protection. Children run beside procession, tossing petals that cling to damp robes. Small gestures of solidarity replace suspicions. Even skeptics whisper that atmosphere feels lighter, as though each step draws out residual sickness from soil itself. By midday, the shrine comes into view. Stone chapel, perched above bend where river narrows. Its roof flashes copper under sun, visible beacon from miles. The pace quickens despite exhaustion. Inside, bells begin pealing, pure notes scattering birds from trees. The first pilgrims reach steps, trembling but determined. Priests tether horses, help the frail ascend one by one. Within, votive candles blaze. The saint's carved image glows behind altar draped in crimson cloth. The heavy scent of resin fills lungs, dizzying yet sweet. Father Matthias leads prayer of deliverance. His voice weaves through murmured sobs. Saint Vitus, who understood endurance beyond pain, receive these souls and grant them stillness. He lifts silver censer. Smoke coils like ghost of rhythm itself rising toward rafter. You watch as sufferers kneel, some collapsing fully, others clasping hands. One by one, their tremors slow. Whether fatigue, faith, or mercy causes, it cannot be known. The priest proclaims miracle even before silence fully settles. People weep out of relief, perhaps more than belief. Outsaid, sunlight catches, fragments of incense drifting from windows. The river nearby glitters, carrying away faint echoes of chant. You linger on stone steps, overwhelmed by contradiction, spectacle and sincerity, superstition and solace bound tightly together. Yet in that balance lies humanity itself, our need to assign pattern to chaos, sacred to suffering. As evening descends, the pilgrims rest upon grass near the chapel. The afflicted, calmer now, eat bread blessed by clergy. You notice how they chew slowly, reverently, as though redeeming that which once poised them. Father Matthias passes among them, offering water laced with herbs. When he reaches you, he smiles faintly. See, he says, the river bears away what we cannot understand. You nod, watching reflection of flickering torches merge with current. The procession that began in despair ends not with certainty, but with humility, recognition that some mysteries accept no autopsy. Around you, the weary begin singing softly without instruction, their tune a lullaby rather than lament. Night deepens. Stars pierce, clouds above shrine mirrored in river below, heaven and earth in slow conversation. Pilgrims fall asleep where they sit, breaths sinking like gentle tide. For the first time in months, Strasbourg rests behind them, quiet and distant. You close your eyes to the rhythm of flowing water and realize the city's fever has finally cooled into memory. Yet even now, as you drift towards sleep, faint echoes remind a reminder that faith and fear often dance the same slow step along the banks of history. One linger by the river near Saverne, long after the pilgrims have dispersed, the night air cool and clean. The water murmurs softly, carrying away the chant of prayers. Yet inside your mind, echoes rise again, different drums, different centuries. The priest's tale of St. Vitus reminds you there were other summers when Europe shuddered to a similar rhythm. To understand what happened in Strasbourg, you have to follow that echo backward in time, toward older madness and older faith. Imagine now the year 1374, a century and a half before this plague of motion. You walk the stone streets of Aachen, another city on the Rhine, smaller, rougher, but touched by the same mingled piety and fear. The air here smells of smoke and livestock, the inns crowded with pilgrims who have come seeking relics of the Emperor Charlemagne. In midsummer heat, the old town shines like brass, its people restless after years of famine and war. Then, one July morning, sound bursts loose from the marketplace, drumming feet on wood, dozens of them. You hurry there and find a scene uncannily familiar. Men and women circling in frantic harmony to unseen music. Some cry hymns, others shriek laughter. Their arms flail as if beating invisible demons from the air. Sweat glistens, eyes whiten. They dance until the ground blurs beneath them and collapse sprawling, only to rise again when breath returns. A chronicler named Justus records it later. Entire groups moved as though seized by fever of the limbs, claiming visions of heavenly light or infernal fire. They leapt into streets so fierce that bystanders feared contagion of spirit. And like in Strasbourg, the movement spread along trade, Rotzekan to Cologne, Cologne to Trier, then down the Rhine Valley toward Alsace itself. Everywhere, churches filled with supplicants, begging explanation. Physicians wrote letters linking the fits to poised air. Monks called them divine scourge. The people simply watched, powerless, as neighbors joined in. You picture them peasants and cobblers, mothers and soldiers grinding their souls through dust until blood stained the stones red. Knocken, the clergy responded first with prayer, then with suspicion. The archbishop forbade public dancing within city walls, fearing blasphemy disguised as ecstasy. Yet the order came too late. Those already moving claimed that angels commanded them, that St. John or St. Vitus whispered in their ears, promising salvation through rhythm. They called themselves the Chosen. Around their necks hung cloth badges painted with crosses. In their hands they carried staffs tipped with bells that jingled like laughter against sorrow. At night they camped outside the gates, torches circling overhead like captive stars. Witnesses said the sound never ceased, chants repeating until sunrise, words collapsing into nonsense syllables that still throbbed with belief. Musician monks, sent to observe, confessed the melodies seemed both joyful and terrifying. Harmonies rising out of exhaustion rather than desire. From these wanderers soon grew larger bands. They called themselves Brotherhoods of Repentance, though townsfolk whispered another name, Flagellants. They entered cities barefoot, singing psalms. At first, people knelt before them, thinking deliverers had come to wash away plague through self-inflicted pain. But reverence turned to unease when penitents began striking themselves with whips tipped in iron. 40, 50 at once, moving in time, backs striped with fluids. They believed each blow freed souls from purgatory. In their procession, a powerful rhythm thrummed again, the same dark heartbeat that centuries later would guide Strasbourg's dancers. Pain became prayer. Movement became language for guilt. Pour them through cobbled towns of the Rhineland. The sight repeats endlessly. A long column of white-robed figures marching two by two. Rhythm of lash echoing against walls. Each evening, after beating themselves half unconscious, they lie in rows whispering blessings for those watching. The spectacle carries magnetic pull. Citizens weep, then join lines the next day, craving the relief of pain properly timed. It doesn't last. Church leaders grow alarmed by independence of these rituals, their challenge to priestly mediation. Edicts spread ordering flagellants to disperse. Some obey, others flee into mountains. Convinced persecution confirms holiness. Slowly the rhythm breaks apart, leaving behind scattered survivors haunted by phantom throbbing under their skin. Even after their disappearance, the image clings within European memory, the spectacle of bodies united in ecstatic suffering, believing motion can cleanse collective sins. You realize that when Frau Trophea began to dance 150 years later, Strasbourg already knew what such movements meant. The city had seen penitence embodied before. A rhythm of superstition survived beneath the surface of faith, like a buried drum, waiting centuries to be struck again. You wander the archives of a monastery near the border, reading testimonies copied from 1374. One parchment describes how dancers claimed to see heavens opened. They called upon saints, laughed, and wept at once. It says, "Another warns that when touched, the afflicted stiffened, as if lightning through body." The phrasing mirrors later accounts almost word for word. History, it seems, doesn't repeat accidents, it repeats metaphor. The monks analyzing these records argue among themselves. Some insist that demonic possession explains both century same, enemy, different era. Others see pattern of hunger and heat recurring with climate's cycle. You listen to debate as rain taps roof tiles like faint percussion. Each monk speaks with conviction. None persuade the others. The echo of 1518 hangs between them unsolved. When they pause, an elder named Brother Raphael offers quiet observation. Perhaps these plagues are not punishments or poisons, but reflections. When the soul of Christendom aches, the body confesses through movement. His voice trembles slightly, yet sense glows within it. The rest nod slowly, more comforted by poetry than logic. Pleave in the monastery. You keep hearing Raphael's phrase, "the body confesses through movement." It explains both flagellant and dancer, both lash and step. Each generation seeks salvation through the flesh when words run dry. Later that month, you travel a priver and find remnants of a smaller chapel dedicated to St. John, patron of an earlier dancing epidemic. The caretaker, an aged woman whose family tends shrine since memory began, shows you faded murals along the apse. They depict people clasping hands in circle beneath blazing sun, their faces crowded with joy and terror alike. Our grandparents called it the Summer March, she tells you. They said sinners burnt from inside out and danced to release the fire. Inside a recess she keeps relics once belonging to those pilgrims. Cracked tambourines, fragments of rope belts, a brass bell. Each carries patina of devotion worn into metal. She says disease left few written names, but countless superstitions. Villagers avoided whistling after dark for fear the tune might summon the dance again. At harvest festivals, even innocent reels were shortened. Laughter near church walls considered provocation. Motion itself required guilt, yet no community could live without it. You walk back into dusk thinking of that paradox. Humanity's instinct for rhythm and simultaneous dread of losing control to it. The line between celebration and contagion always razor thin. In Cologne's city records of 1374, another account, surface one of the earliest psychological portraits ever written. The Notori Henricus describes woman named Greta who joined dancers for 3 days before collapsing. When I asked what vision seized her, he wrote, she said she saw a sea of red light and heard voices crying her name in rhythm. Each blow of her heart compelled the next step. Every word fit Strasbourg again. You imagine her like Frau Trafia centuries later, bearing identical bewilderment victim of fire that leaps generations. Henricus confesses, ending his report with prayer, Lord, spare mankind the madness of movement. Yet of course it returned. Humans forget prayers more readily than patterns. Back in modern Strasbourg you stand before the cathedral wall where restoration reveals carvings of penitents carved centuries prior. Their faces eroded but their posture familiar, heads tilted back, mouths parted mid-chant. The sculptor captured motion in still stone, proof that the theme never left local imagination. The artisans who built Cathedral Spire lived nearer in time to the 1374 dancers than to you, and perhaps their chisels carried subconscious tributate memorializing rhythm even as they feared it. A local historian joined you, pointing out one half-worn inscription above doorway. Corpora moventa, eutonimi, salventa, bodis, move that souls be saved. He laughs softly. Imagine writing that on a church now. The phrase could be motto for every outbreak from Ocon to Strasbourg. As you trace the timeline, patterns interlaced tighter. In both centuries, drought and flood followed each other cruelly. Crops failed, merchants hoarded, sermons thundered about repentance. In both, summer heat pressed cities into delirium. Education advanced, but fear remained equal measure. It's as if Europe itself grew feverish at intervals, purging toil through performance. You recall the flagellant's whips striking back then, the Strasbourg drums in your own lifetime, and realize they beat same tempo pain every second and hope between. Movement becomes the universal language for crisis. You cross into Flanders, visiting churches where old frescoes still depict lines of dancers tethered by ribbons to angels overhead. The guide explains these images once warned against temptation. Now art scholars interpret them as memory of collective trauma, medieval record of psychological eruption before words existed for it. In candlelight, the painted limbs seem to shift slightly. Illusion of motion captured forever. You feel dizzy watching. A friar accompanying you murmurs, perhaps we all carry the dance in miniature. He taps his chest, where heart pulsing beneath cloth nearly matures rhythm of your breathing. For an instant the idea feels true. By winter you return to Strasbourg with pages of notes from these journeys. In them you compare both plagues side by side. The parallels multiply until difference matters less than continuity. Both began in heat following famine. Both spread by sight, not by touch. Both inspired belief in saintly or demonic cause. Both ended in fatigue disguised as miracle. You read the list aloud, and halfway through speaking realize you sound like chronicler trapped in loop. Each age rewrites the same 4 lines under different saints' names. This understanding distills into quiet awe rather than hopelessness. If mania returns predictably, it also extinguishes predictably. Every fever burns out when community exhausts its fear. The rhythm that begins as destruction ends as relief. Still unease persists. As spring approaches, you dream one night of standing again in square of 1518. But the faces around you wear costumes from 1374, hooded penitents, swinging whips instead of dancers twisting hands. Their chants merge with drums until you can't separate centuries. When you wake, your pulse matches that dream tempo. You lie still, listening to it fade. That morning you climb Cathedral Tower for view across River Plain. Mist blankets rooftops. Spire bells hang silent, though wind strong. Below, markets stir normally. People move through streets, unaware that beneath each step lies sediment of forgotten rhythms. The choreography of Bodhis who once sought meaning through endure. You whisper small prayer, not for deliverance but remembrance, that such fever, if it must return, come with insight, not cruelty. Before leaving tower, you jot final reflection into notebook, asterisk the 1374 dancers prayed by motion. The 1518 dancers suffered by the same. The flagellants sought redemption through wounds. Our neighbors through exhaustion. Between lash and step stretches, century of learning. Yet the question endures, how much pain will humanity invent to feel forgiven? Asterisk, ink pools at the end of that sentence. You close notebook carefully, aware that anyone reading years hence may interpret it as prophecy. Descending spiral stairs. The wind follows like distant drumbeat echoing from unseen centuries. You realize the rhythm never belonged solely to plague or pen and seeds, woven into civilization itself, waiting for each generation to provide new choreography. When you reach street again, sunlight breaks through cloud, catching dust swirling in the air. The particles twist in columns of light like miniature dancers. For a moment, history condenses into that shimmer a lesson, or maybe just reminded that rhythm and faith, madness and meaning have always moved side by side, partners in the same long, unending dance. You spend the next months walking through Strasbourg as winter settles its cool hand over the river. The air sharpens. The smell of plague and sweat has faded, leaving smoke, resin, and the faint sweetness of stored apples. Life creeps back into its routine, yet underneath the hum of trade you sense a new wariness. People speak softly of health, as though naming sickness might wake it again. The city heals, but cautiously, like a scar deciding whether to close. You begin in the physician's quarter, tucked behind the cathedral gardens. The narrow lane smells of rosemary, juniper, and the sharp tang of spirits cooked in copper stills. Each door bears sign of a leech or serpent, marking households where medicine is practiced. Inside one, candles drip against shelves crowded with bottles, milky infusions, crimson syrups, powders labeled in Latin. The doctor here, Nicholas, greets you with distracted impatience. He is weighing blood in glass vials suspended from brass scales. Balance, he mutters. All sickness is imbalance. Restore proportion, restore life. He explains the art of humors. 4 rivers within the body blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. When one overflows, madness or fever results. He shows you parchment diagrams, where the human form resembles an alchemist's furnace, each organ a vessel for temperaments. You ask how he treats disorder born of dancing. He taps the red vial. too much heat of blood. I draw it away. His tools gleam on the table. Fleams for cutting veins. Cups for drawing suction after fire. You imagine those blades used upon trembling wrists, the small hiss as pressure releases. Around you, apprentices grind dried roots, valerian for calm, wormwood for purge. The room hums with purposeful activity, a miniature city seeking equilibrium after chaos. Nikolaos insists these treatments saved several survivors. He brags of one woman whose convulsions ceased after 6 bleedings. The soul quiets once the fluids obey, he says. Yet his eyes keep glancing toward window, uneasy with his own certainty. Leaving his workshop, you cross into a different world, that of household healers and midwives. The women half condemned, half depended upon. In the tanner's quarter you meet Frau Elsbeth, grey-haired, her apron stiff with salt from generations of curing hides. She invites you into a kitchen where dried herbs hang like shriveled prayers. Men use knives, she tells you, crushing lavender between her palms. We use scent. She believes fragrance can chase illness from mind as incense chases flies from church. It is she who tends dancers after the council declares them cured. You watch as she rubs their scarred feet with goose fat mixed with mint, murmuring verses that come more from memory than theology. Pain leaves through warmth, she explains. You must remind skin it belongs again to stillness. The women she treats breathe easier afterward. Whether by bomb or belief, you can't tell. Healing here is part craft, part kindness. No one measures results, only relief. Walk farther, and healing takes yet stranger forms. Behind the cathedral, bathhouses reopen after long closure. Their wooden tubs steam like miniature fogs. For weeks they were banned too close, a touch during plague. But now officials encourage bathing to purge residues of corruption. Men and women soak in separate rooms, whispering news through lattice screens. Attendants stir the water with bundles of chamomile and lime blossoms. You sink briefly into one tub yourself, feeling heat unwind the city's echo from your bones. The water smells faintly of metal from the pipes. Its warmth spreads like apology. In the afternoons, you visit apothecaries at work. They live between science and sorcery, merchants of hope in glass and paper. One grinds coral into powder for hearts that flutter. Another distills poppy into syrup for restless minds. The most enterprising sells St. Vitus salt, promising endurance against spasms. Customers buy it by the spoon until rumor spreads that it merely tastes of ordinary brine. He changes the recipe to include red dye, claiming divine fire hid within color. People return, comforted more by ritual than content. You begin to understand. In Strasbourg, faith itself is an ingredient added to every remedy to make it work. Outside, the city's rhythm rearranges itself around healing. Bell ringers mark each noon with short hymns dedicated to protection from fever. Bakers carve crosses atop loaves before sliding them into heat. Every craft develops small exorcisms. You watch a stonemason whisper blessing on chisel before touching foundation. Even skeptics imitate habits once mocked. Perhaps the dance taught them caution or gratitude wrapped in superstition. When spring returns, hospital gardens burst with work. The Holy Ghost Hospital spreads herbs across terraces like patchwork of green. Monks in brown habits tend beds of sage, comfrey, and plantain plants, both medicinal and symbolic. They dry leaves on wooden racks, later mixing powders for poultices and teas. You help them one morning, gathering marigold petals, while Brother Johann quotes Galen between psalms. The Creator placed remedy beside every wound. He tells you gently, we seek them in soil because they grow from same earth that bears us. His hands are rough, yet careful as he binds stems into bundles. Watching him, you feel the border blur between science and prayer. News travels through these gardens like breeze. One rumor claims a scholar in Basel has written treatise linking the dance to lunar influence. Another says a friar proposes experiments with magnet stones to draw sickness from organs. Every theory adds a layer to Siti's knowledge, but also confusion. Still, the act of study becomes its own medicine. By seeking order, people quiet fear. Soon the fairs return, the great sign that life resets. At midsummer, traders from the Alps arrive with cartloads of mountain honey and copper pots. In that crowd you hear laughter again, a sound absent for months. Children chase a piper who dares play simple reel. His tune, soft and slow, loops harmlessly. Yet you watch older citizens glance upward, wary. One priest blesses the air discreetly, ensuring rhythm remains pleasure, not penance. You realize how healing may require remembering without repeating. The city's arts mirror this recovery. Painters decorate tavern walls with scenes of saints subduing demons through gentle gestures. Scribes illuminate manuscripts showing angels placing hands upon weary dancers turned peaceful. Even guild banners stitched for upcoming processions feature motifs of balance, water quenching fire, sun and moon in equal halves. Visual language performs therapy that medicine only attempts. You visit the Weavers' Guild Hall, where women embroider linen for hospital use. Their fingers move like metronomes of quiet industry. Among them sits the baker's daughter, once among the afflicted, now calms. She hums under breaths, low tune, not dangerous but measured. Each time needle pierces cloth, she exhales. The rhythm stays. She tells you, but softer now. I weave it into thread instead of bones. Her smile carries both sorrow and accomplishment. Perhaps this is what healing means, converting compulsion into art. As evenings grow long, apothecaries and clergy alike host small gatherings to exchange insight. You attend one such meeting in the magistrate's hall. Around the table sit physicians, monks, merchants, and one skeptical poet. They sip spiced wine and debate where health truly resides, in diet, in faith, or in imagination. Herr Nicolos insists on balance of bodily fluids. The poet counters that harmony of thought cures more reliably. A friar summarizes with weary humor. God made both blood and mind. Heal one, honor the other. Laughter erupts, fragile but genuine. For first time since the outbreak, the city enjoys argument untainted by panic. Walk through neighborhoods after curfew, and you'll hear another kind of recovery. Music returning slowly behind doors. Lutes strummed lightly, flutes practicing scales. Families test joy as a child might test an injured limb. Each note hesitates, waits for response from night. You stand outside one such house listening until melody steadies. Relief flows through you like warm current. Sound no longer provokes dread. It signals survival. Not all healers live in comfort. Beyond the city gates, in meadows wet with thaw, dwell herbalists forbidden by guilds. You seek them out one afternoon, guided by rumor of fresh remedies. They call themselves Green Sisters, widows who learned through necessity. Their huts smell of smoke and nettle. One offers tonic brewed from yarrow to strengthen heart after fright. You taste bitterness followed by unexpected calm. She smiles knowingly. Fear leaves through the tongue, she says. Her logic may defy textbooks, but your pulse slows nonetheless. Before leaving, you ask how she survived the dancing plague untouched. She shrugs. I listened to the forest instead of drums. In city hospitals. Meanwhile, innovation quietly grows. Surgeons begin cleaning wounds with wine rather than water, claiming purity of spirit deters rot. A visiting Italian demonstrates stitching technique using fine silk thread. The apprentices gape as cut skin closes almost neatly. Even skeptics admire results. You sense knowledge shifting from rote tradition toward experiment healing, redefining itself piece by piece. Everywhere you go, the theme repeats. Order reclaimed through small acts. Market weights recalibrated. Clocks repaired. Salters recopied. Masons patch fissures in bridges damaged by summer floods. Perhaps they see in stone the metaphor of their own cracks. The people no longer chase miracles. They practiced maintenance. One afternoon you stand on cathedral steps watching pilgrims kneel before newly carved statue of St. Vitus. The saint's expression is no longer wrathful but serene. Children leave flowers at his feet instead of ribbons. The transformation feels like truce between fright and faith. You whisper wish that peace remain, though part of you knows memory never fully rests. Months later, when plague of a different sort strikes a neighboring town, Strasbourg reacts with discipline rather than frenzy. Physicians issue hygiene edicts, boil water, burn rags without invoking demons. Priests organize aid for poor instead of sermons about sin. You realize the earlier madness taught them more than terror. It taught administration. Suffering refined civic reflexes better than any council reform. You meet again with Herr Nikolaus, who now writes treatise on movements of the soul expressed through the body. He thanks you for earlier notes about Frau Elsbeth's bombs, having incorporated them as evidence of psychical calm influencing humors. When you ask if he still believes bleeding cures everything, he chuckles. Sometimes a gentle word works quicker. His humility surprises you and signals progress. Life trickles into rhythm reminiscent of its old self, yet touched by greater patience. During Lent, public processions resume under rule that music remains slow and solemn. Citizens comply happily. Even children, falling into spontaneous skips, are met with indulgent shushes rather than fear. The line between worship and celebration steadies into coexistence. Rage revives fully by midsummer. You walk along Rhine where barges again queue with wine casks and lumber. The water reflects towers clear and undisturbed. Fishermen hum under breath. Women wash clothes along embankment, humming back. These minor cadences join river's noise into new harmony, nor torrential like fever, but persistent, sustaining. The city beats still, but this time in healthy sync with world around it. Pat twilight, standing beneath cathedral's spire. You recall each stage of healing, the doctors with their jars, the women with their herbs, the monks with gardens, the cautious musicians relearning trust in sound. Together they form mosaic of resilience. You realize healing was never single act of cure, but choreography of mercy, citizens turning toward one another rather than away. As evening bells begin their familiar pattern, you find yourself tapping fingertip against, railing in gentle accompaniment. For once, the rhythm comforts instead of commands. The pulses align not of mania now, but of living city reconciled with motion. Walking home through smell of fresh bread and distant river mist, you pause outside Frau Elsbeth's door. Through window light you glimpse her stirring pot of balm, lips moving in silent tune. Her granddaughter hums along. The sound mingles with street breeze carrying hint of time from hospital gardens. You listen until all blends into one steady breath. For a long minute you stand there, neither historian nor witness, simply part of the city's quiet metabolism. Healing, you realize, is not end of sickness, but conversation with it, a rhythm learned, adjusted, remembered. As you reach your threshold, the moon lifts over Rhine, pale and rounding anew. Somewhere across water a late harp plays slow pattern of chords. Each note drifts like heartbeat dispersed through cool air. You smile softly, accepting that Strasbourg will always keep a rhythm within its stones, no longer fevered, only alive. 400 years have passed since Strasbourg's fever of motion, yet you can still feel the rhythm moving faintly under the cobblestones. You stand in the same market, squared, different name, different faces surrounded by cafes and tramlines instead of stalls and torches. The stones shine with rain. Modern shoes click where bare feet once bled. Nothing of the madness remains except story, and even that beats quietly inside the city's archives. You step inside to listen. Inside the state library, sunlight slides through tall windows onto rows of desks. Historians bend over manuscripts like confessors hearing centuries of sin. You sit among them, turning pages bound in fading leather. Each crack of spine sounds faintly like percussion reminder that research, too, keeps rhythm. The first volume you open is an 18th century chronicle written in crisp script. Its author calls the dancers children of folly, victims of ignorance. He blames heat, idleness, and cheap wine. His tone boasts certainty now, absent from science. Reading, you sense arrogance born of distance. Tragedies always look simpler when centuries cool them. A later scholar, writing in the 19th century, imagines fanatic sects under enchantment of sound. He sketches diagrams comparing muscle movements to tides, arguing that physical exhaustion produced ecstasy. His logic circles neatly, satisfied by symmetry rather than empathy. Still, you picture him by candlelight, trying to tame mystery within equations. Even disbelief bows before fascination. Across the hall, you attend a modern lecture. Amplifiers hum. Students tap at laptops, where manuscripts once hid trembling quills. The professor projects images, medieval paintings of dancers in red, satellite maps of the Rhine plain under drought, chemical diagrams of ergot alkaloids. The fungus theory remains plausible, he announces, but stress political, climatic, economic provides context. The body responds collectively when social order collapses. You note how his vocabulary, psychosocial event, sounds cool enough to keep history at arm's length. Still, fascination leaks through. At one slide, showing parish notes listing deaths without cause, his voice softens. "Imagine the noise," he says. You know then that even within data his heart beats curious reverence. The students listen, half hypnotized, half skeptical. It's always that waither plague of motion, forever balanced between horror and wonder. After lecture, in the hallway, you overhear Teresa's debate. One insists on ergot poisoning. The other cites mass psychogenic illness. Their words collide like instruments out of tune. "It must be material," says the first. "Without physical substance, there is no contagion." "But you ignore belief," counters the second. "Belief moves faster than toxin." You smile faintly, recognizing reenactment of an older argument. Keller and Lorenz reborn in modern dress, in an adjacent gallery. A new exhibition opens rhythms of crises. Glass cases display painted shoes excavated from early modern basements. Tiny leather forms twisted as though mid-motion. Plaques describe the 1518 event, linking it to later outbreaks of collective behavior, vivalist frenzies, wartime hysteria, even contemporary social panics. Patterns of empathy, the curator writes. You realize history now studies not only disease but transmission of emotion itself. Audience members drift from case to case like penitents in secular church. Each whispers astonishment at how much they recognize in the faces carved on replica panels, the open mouths, the pleading eyes, outside the cathedral towers unchanged. Tourists photograph its spire, unaware that beneath their feet once thundered drums sanctioned by city decree. You lean against stone, warmed by sun, and imagine the square filling again, not with dancers but visitors holding phones, recording themselves turning slowly before facade, another form of choreography. Every age produces its chosen motion, its ritual of visibility. The platform may change, but desire to synchronize survives. At night you join a candlelight lecture in the crypt, hosted by a local historian named Marek. He speaks softly, guiding audience through centuries of reinterpretation. The Renaissance blamed humors. The Reformation blamed sin. The Enlightenment blamed ignorance. And now we blame stress, he says, aligning eras like chapters of one restless mind. But perhaps the truth is plural. The dance was not one phenomenon. It was every explanation reflected together. The flickering light exaggerates motion of his hands. You find yourself unconsciously tapping finger in time with cadence of his sentences. The audience shifts similarly bides, adjusting secretly to rhythm of storytelling. Even analysis carries pulse. Later, walking home, you cross the bridge, spanning the Rhine. Light ripples beneath railing. You pause, hearing faint percussion from open-air concert downriver. Drums, amplified, throb against night air steady. Seductive tempo meant for celebration, yet recalling unease. Across centuries, rhythm unchanged. You wonder how much of civility depends on controlling beat. Turn too fast, and order dissolves again. Weeks later you travel to Basel to meet Dr. Anna Valmer, a neurologist who has written extensively on mass motor phenomena. Her office walls bear framed IG patterns, modern hieroglyphs of brainwaves. She gestures toward one, smiling. See here, synchrony. A whole group of subjects mirror the same frequency when moved by identical emotion. It's measurable empathy. She leans back, thoughtful. The miracle of 1518 isn't that they danced. It's that they did it together. She shows you graphs of collective rhythms, audiences applauding until chaos self-organizes into pulse. Soldiers marching until hearts align. Humans crave coordination, she says. It reassures them they're not alone. Under trauma, that craving intensifies till coordination replaces individuality. She glances toward window where trams hum in near-perfect interval. Our cities still move like that. You ask if she views the dancing plague as illness or communication. Both, she answers. Pain seeking chorus. Her phrasing rings poetic despite scientific tone. Before leaving, she tells you something that echoes long afterward. If those people had possessed language for their despair, they might never have needed rhythm. On the train back, you watch fields blur, the same plain where Frau Trophea once stepped into sunlight. Grain sways in slow waves. You imagine invisible correspondences linking past to present. Neurons firing, crowds murmuring, grass bending toward wind. Patterns of motion repeating each generation. Evidence that humanity's body remembers what its mind forgets. A few days later in Strasbourg, symposium banners flutter around Cathedral Square. Scholars from every field assemble, historians, chemists, psychologists, theologians. You attend as observer, notebook opened. The opening panel revisits chemical theories. Slides display close-ups of fungus grains under microscope. The next session shifts to ethics, whether the city's councils were culpable for encouraging dance through music. Voices overlap, microphones feedback. Conversation itself begins to sound percussive. By afternoon, fatigue catches audience. A woman in back row yawns rhythmically. Two others mimic unconsciously. For a moment, laughter spreads, mild contagion, reminding everyone of their subject's mischief. During break, you wander among poster displays. One young historian argues that the council's era taught future municipalities new standards of crisis management. Another researches gender, how most chroniclers minimized women's suffering. You read their abstracts, admiring precision, yet sensing what none dare print. The mystery still tugs beyond scholarship. When everything is explained, wonder dies, and with it empathy. Perhaps that's why the dancing plague persists, refuses total understanding, leaving space where curiosity breathes. You meet a journalist covering event for cultural magazine. She asks you, after all your research, what do you think really happened? Her pen hovers, poised for a definitive quote. You pause, then answered truthfully. I think people felt crushed between hunger and heaven, and chose rhythm over silence. She smiles, writing quickly. Beautiful, she says, though beauty was never the point. Still, you let her keep it. Words are another refuge, like rhythm once was. Evenings you retreat to small apartment overlooking river. From balcony you watch city lights ripple like torch reflections centuries apart. Reading old diaries, you begin to feel companionship across time. The doctors who misread symptoms. The priests who feared music. The dancers who sought meaning through movement. Their intentions mingle, indistinguishable from your own urge to make sense of them. Perhaps every researcher becomes secret participant in the same dance, moving circles around mystery until exhaustion brings peace. You write late into night, crafting your own reflection. To study the plague is to study empathy under duress. Asterisk science measures pulse. Theology measures soul. History measures both beating out of phase. The miracle lies not in cause, but in endurance, the ability to keep living beside horror without turning away. Asterisk. Your pen scratches steady tempo across paper. Somewhere under window, a musician practices slow rhythm on hand drum. The patterns align until you can't tell whose noise fills the room, you or memory. Spring arrives again. The city sponsors art exhibit commemorating the year of the dance. Installations appear along streets, bronze footprints embedded in stone tracing circles across square. Motion sensors triggering faint heartbeat sound when tourists walk over them. Children squeal at echo, unaware of haunting gesture. You stand among them, smiling not. Deterrence but dialogue between eras. Pain remembered as art becomes kindness toward ancestors. At the museum cafe you overhear debate among locals. Why glorified tragedy? Asks an elderly man. We should forget, another replies. If we forget, we risk repeating. Their conversation swells like echo of those council meetings centuries earlier. You realize civic temperament hasn't changed. Strasbourg still argues its conscience in alternating tempos of practicality and faith. Leaving the cafe, you wander through evening air ripe with lilac. Bells ring vespers from cathedral tower. The same tones chroniclers once described trembling over dancers' cries. Now they sound serene. Time transforms alarms into lullabies. Later that year you travel to Triumph, a final piece of research. In a damp archive below monastery ruins you discover parchment missing from Strasbourg's own files, letters between city officials written months after the plague. The handwriting uneven, sentences short, as if fatigue still ruled. One reads, "We have restored calm, though not understanding." The other responds, asterisk, "Understanding is luxury. Quiet is survival." Asterisk, you linger on that line, hearing resonance across all centuries of study. History may never supply explanations proportionate to suffering. Sometimes the truest legacy is silence regained. You leave the archive at sunset. Inside your coat pocket rests copy of those lines. Crossing courtyard, you feel world reduced to simple pulse. Footsteps on stone, heart in chest, bell on wind. Each sound measured, sufficient. Back home, weeks later, you compile your manuscript. On final page you write not a conclusion, but an address to the reader. The same way chroniclers once wrote to God. Imagine a city becoming so afraid of stillness that motion itself turned epidemic. Asterisk, imagine neighbors watching, torn between compassion and delight, until they too were swept inside circle. Then imagine centuries passing, scholars dissecting, artists memorializing, yet all returning to same beat, the need to turn fear into pattern. Asterisk. You close the notebook and rest hand against cover as though calming a living thing. Through window you glimpse modern city, luminous, with order traffic lights blinking in steady intervals. Pedestrians crossing in waves, fountains pulsing light, timed to music. Civilization choreographed its piece. Perhaps that, too, is cure, to harness rhythm rather than banish it. You step outside into midnight. A long embankment couples stroll, their steps unconsciously matched. River mirrors their movement. Ripples travel outward, fade, return. You realize the lesson never change. Connection can save as easily as condemn. When bodies move together gently, empathy replaces contagion. At the heart of Square, a street musician performs slow waltz on violin. You pause, listening. The melody, soft and rising, feels like echo tamed by centuries. Around him people stop, not in frenzy, but solidarity. Every head tilting to same rhythm. You join them, breathing in time. For once, harmony meets history halfway. As you walk home under dim lamps, you murmur final reflection to yourself. The dancing plague belongs to no single theory. It belongs to every moment humanity mistook pain for prayer or silence for guilt. It reminds us that the line between madness and meaning is drawn by context, not by cure. And it warns gently that neither faith nor science fully owns the human body. It moves to its own music, especially when frightened. The words settle over you like quiet blessing. You stop on bridge one last time. The Rhine flows dark, scattered with city lights that skate along surface like tiny votive candles from that long-gone pilgrimage. Water murmurs same rhythm that cradled the dancers centuries past. You lean on railing, listening until sound and heart align. Within that calm, the centuries dissolve the starving artisans, the scholars, the physicians, the priests. Every observer through time, all sharing one fragile wish, that when fear returns, understanding will arrive fast enough to move with it, not against it. You exhale slowly, feeling your pulse steady. The night breeze warms. Bells mark the hour. Strasbourg sleeps, wiser if not safer. The story rests at last, still moving softly within memory's quiet cadence.